This is Autoline This Week, the show that gets you inside the global automotive industry. Autoline This Week partnered with the Consulate General of Canada in Detroit to produce this episode.
Hi, I'm John McElroy, and welcome to Autoline This Week. There's so much technological development going on in the automotive industry right now. Whether it's electric cars, autonomous cars, the whole move to mobility, there's a lot of technology that's getting developed. Now, for the established players, they know how to do it. They've been there, they've done that, they're on their way of doing it. But for startups or new companies coming in, or even just people with ideas, how do you take that technology from an idea stage to the R&D lab to the streets? Well, we're going to talk to three companies today that really know a lot about that. Let me introduce you to them. Nair is the president and CEO of Multimatic. Christoph Lienemann is the managing director of PEM Motion North America. And Pat Roy is the co-founder and chief technology officer of a company called Ettractive. Great to have you all here. Let's get into the discussion. I guess I'll start out with Christoph here. What are some of the most common problems that you encounter with startups or people who have got an idea and want to get it to the auto industry? What are some of the most common problems that you run into with them?
Yeah, first of all, nice to be here on your show. I'm very looking forward for the discussion with all of you. We work with startups since quite a while now, especially in the e-mobility field. And what we have seen is that there's a big problem for startups to overcome the first challenges with having an idea and then putting it into a prototype. So to find investors, to convince someone of your idea and to show how really good it is, you need, first of all, to have a prototype to show something to the public. And that, of course, requires a lot of money and investment to get there, but also experience and people who help you to get to this prototype. And then going that way, there's also a lot of challenges afterwards. So you have maybe a nice prototype, but the question is how you make that now to a serious product, how to build that into production. So we see a lot of challenges also within the first prototype, but also then moving that into a larger series and into production. And that, of course, requires strong partners, which I think we all represent here today.
Pat, what are some of the common problems that you run across?
Typically, it's balancing cost and quality. So a startup, as you guys all know, has a much higher tolerance to risk than an OEM, and how they handle those engineering challenges and the investment in that engineering and how that decreases downstream risk is very different from an OEM. So being able to tailor that engineering experience and all of the work that goes behind developing the prototype and then moving that into production, being able to tailor that for a startup and focus on the things which are specifically risky to those organizations, those are the big challenges I see.
And Raj, do you see anything different than what Christoph and Pat have mentioned?
No, I mean, I'd agree with those points. I think for us, we're probably in a little bit of a unique situation, being one of the global tier one OEM suppliers, but also being a low volume manufacturer as well. We kind of see that spectrum from low volume to high volume manufacturing. And that's one of the things that we see with startups that obviously, very familiar with whatever technology they're working on, but the nature of industrializing that, understanding of how high volume manufacturing, engineering, even commercial aspects work is one of the areas that we kind of provide a little bit of insight because we see both sides of it.
Raj, Multimatic deals with so much leading edge technology in automotive. Do you work with a lot of startups? Do a lot of people come to you with ideas, or is this sort of homegrown technology within Multimatic?
It's a good question, John. Again, we're a global 100 OEM supplier, and so we're in very high volume manufacturing. So we've got a large engineering organization, and a lot of it is homegrown. But the fact that we also do a lot of motorsports activities, motorsports technology, we obviously build the niche vehicles, build the Ford GT, picture in the background. So we deal with a lot of very high technologies, low volumes, which has a lot of startups in that area. And so it's a great opportunity for us to get that into production in low volume and supercars or race cars or whatever they may be. But also maybe take a look at that as to, are there high volume applications for it? Some of that is our own homegrown stuff, but some of it is working with some partners and suppliers on some of these really cool projects.
And Pat, how do startups or people with ideas find you, or do you go after them? How does that all come together?
Yeah, I mean, it's the usual trade shows, reaching out, our business development team members reaching out to those organizations when we see that a company might be on the cusp, when we see that a company might be ready to take that next step from maybe their first prototype or an early render to move to that first vehicle, maybe that first small batch of vehicles. That's how we get in touch with those people.
Mm-hmm.
Opportunities like this.
Oh, yeah, and shows like this. That's right. Hopefully, Christoph, same thing. How do you find these companies to work with? How do they find you?
Yeah, so I mean, we are a spin out of the university in Germany ourselves, so we are normally very close connected to the research, to the innovation bit, and that helps us, of course, to stay in that turf and find the right partners there and be very early on in an innovative phase and support them, maybe even in the first idea stage. Later on, I mean, it's word of mouth, which helps, of course, and having just good references and exactly, shows like this. I really enjoy being here today.
So I'll just, anybody can jump in on this, but here's the question. Do you have to turn business away ever? Do you have to tell some starry-eyed inventor that no, their product's just not going to work?
Yes, sometimes.
yeah, we do.
EV. Sorry, Raj, go ahead.
No, I think there's just a lot of great ideas out there, and a lot of startups working on things, but sometimes they're just not a good fit, or they're just not mature enough, or to be honest, sometimes they're just not a good idea. But yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that EV is a tricky space. The way that power and torque kind of manifest and have an effect on EVs is a little bit different from gasoline engines, and sometimes making that shift and the assumptions that are made about the torque capabilities, the power capabilities of e-powertrains can be a real challenge. And I think a lot of startups go into that a little bit naively, and sometimes it's the role of organizations like us to kind of let them know what the capability and the ultimate performance of their product is going to be. And sometimes that's not a good fit.
Christoph?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree to that. And sometimes it's, on the paper it looks pretty nice, the calculation add up, but somehow you have to bring that into a serious product, and then there comes manufacturing, there comes supply chain. So there are the daily life challenges the automotive world suffers from, and bringing them down to earth is part of our job, I think.
I hope you let them down gently.
Always.
Yeah.
So Pat, let's say I'm a startup. I've got a brilliant idea. It might be going someplace, but I can't do it on my own. I come to Ettractive. What do you guys do for me?
I mean, initially what we're going to do is what we just talked about, which is look at the performance of the vehicle, look at what your vehicle expectations are, and then we're going to verify that the engineering matches. Beyond there, typically with any EV, it becomes a bit of a commercial exercise of finding the right partners and suppliers in order to supply that equipment into the vehicle. And once you've kind of done all of that, then you can look at that first prototype, maybe that first small batch of prototypes.
Mm-hmm. Raj, I've got a startup. I'm raring to go. I want to get in the automotive industry. How do you help me out?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're probably one of those partners that gets matched up, to be honest. So when we are making contact, it's usually because we've got a specific problem we're looking at. So it's rarely just a cold call. And so that certainly helps, that we're reaching into the community on a specific problem and kind of know what we're looking for. So kind of know if it's going to be a good fit. We do get the cold calls, and we try to provide advice, but if it's not a fit into a project, that we're working on right now, we'll probably send them to somebody like Ettractive or someone else, because they've got a lot more context that maybe there is a good fit for them.
Yeah.
Then I hope you someday also send them to us.
Yeah,
great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
we won't discriminate.
Maybe to close that discussion on how we can help. Yeah. So we normally like to help things which have never been done. Yeah. So we are not really the engineering company who does the standard engineering with a large team, but rather having a complete new idea which was never realized, and then supporting the startup, bringing that to a first prototype, and then also finding investors. We have a large VC corporation in Europe with Early Bird, where we also invest in companies. We also spin out some companies ourselves. So actually here, that's the street scooter. That's a company we built in 2009 in Germany, successfully sold to DHL, and basically since then supporting also other startups on that journey to really start something which has never been done. So I think for this, we are the right people to support. We are not the right people to do the large-scale F-150 engineering. That is a bit too big for us.
Yeah. Raj, it was interesting you say that you're often matched up. Are car companies bringing startups that have got good ideas and say, here, Multimatic, you guys got to help them get this thing production ready?
Occasionally, it's more often that we're working on some specific project that needs a technical solution that we don't have, and we start doing research and looking out at what papers have been published or what companies we've heard of, and then reaching out to those companies. The OEMs do occasionally do that, but I think what's unique about us as to why we're kind of attractive is this aspect of that we do low volume and high volume. So, there are parts that we do only 4 of a year for a Formula One team, or that we do for the F-150, like you just mentioned, where we're doing the front suspension or the tailgates on the F-150. So the fact that we can take some of these technologies that do lend themselves to introduction and low volume first, and just to get started, and then but be prepared to ramp them up to high volume is one of the reasons that either an OEM or our own reach out to a startup looks pretty attractive to them to work with somebody like Multimatic.
Mm-hmm. And Pat, so do Tier 1 suppliers or OEMs bring companies to Ettractive, or is it the other way around? Ettractive is helping them develop their products to take it to the bigger companies.
Yeah, it could go either way. It's not uncommon for an OEM to realize that there's some nascent tech that is not quite ready yet, and for them to bring in a third party to help get that over the line. So companies like the three of us here have that OEM experience and know how to get that product from where it is a prototype into where it is acceptable, and meets the engineering and commercial standards of an OEM.
Mm-hmm. And Christoph, it sounds like PEM is making or helping entrepreneurs bring their products to market rather than take it to some other bigger company. Is that right?
It depends. Yeah. So we work also with OEMs. We work also with Tier 1. So that's a big mix, and I think that network, this ecosystem, makes it work in the end. Yeah. So bridging that context, bouncing back ideas to some of our partners, and finding the right suppliers for them is usually how we do it.
I'd like to get your ideas on bringing industry, R&D labs, academia together. Is that part of the successful mix of what you're all doing? Who wants to jump at that first?
Yeah, certainly. At least here in Windsor, there's a concerted effort from a lot of different organizations in order to make Windsor an automobility hub and focus on those technologies, so both autonomous and electric vehicles. So we're happy to be part of that, and we benefit from groups like Invest Windsor Essex, who are helping to bring more companies like us into this area, as well as from the universities, and as well as from all of the other industry that's here in Windsor, from fabricators to machining centers, to injection mold, to all the rest of it.
Pat, is that a new effort, and how's it going?
I can't speak to that directly. It's been ongoing for at least 1.5 years now, since we've been here formally as Ettractive, March of last year. And my understanding is that it's going exceptionally well. So there's us and several other companies who have now announced that they're going to be here in Windsor, taking advantage of that ecosystem.
Christoph, you mentioned that PEM Motion is a spin-off of the University of Aachen, I believe, in Germany, right?
That's correct, yes.
And so same thing that Pat was saying, you must see great value in bringing these different areas, industry, R&D, academia together.
Yeah, for us, that's part of our DNA. In Germany, we launched successfully a few startups, and that was only possible because of the close collaboration between industry partners, academia, research, and companies like us and the startups. So in Germany, we have the campus in Aachen, where we bring all the partners together working on different fields, for example, e-mobility. We are now partnering also in the California Mobility Center in Sacramento. That's a similar initiative with the local universities, with some industry partners, and also interesting government organizations who help really the regulation for electric vehicles to be more attractive. And as Pat mentioned, we are also part of the Canadian Automobility Hub in Windsor, because Windsor for us is a very attractive region with the close proximity to Detroit, but also with the local partners, strong universities, the strong college, and bringing those all together, working in that field, in our opinion, is the future and creates a lot of synergies and an ecosystem which really benefits all partners involved. Of course, it has its downsides with IP, with managing all the different stakeholders and their interest. But in the end, I think with collaborating in such ecosystem, we can just grow all together in this very interesting field much better.
Mm-hmm. And Raj, does Multimatic get involved in this kind of thing?
We do. We certainly have close relationships with the universities, University of Toronto, Waterloo, McMaster's, Queen's. We're probably not as maybe altruistic as Pat and Christoph, that we work on more proprietary projects and try to make an internal commercial success of that, particularly on something that's homegrown within Multimatic. But even our joint projects with startups tend to be things that we're looking at with quite a bit of commercial interest and technical interest. So we're looking at proprietary technologies. That's what differentiates us as a supplier, our technical strength. So it's kind of key to our DNA and key to our business.
Yeah. Pat, what's the key to making this work, this collaboration of different groups? Because I got to imagine there's no central authority, right? I mean, sure, you're coming together as a group, but everyone's bringing different ideas, different experiences, even different cultures, business cultures, certainly. What's the key that makes this work?
I mean, the advantage that we have being a small company is that flexibility, right? So it doesn't matter which organization, whether it be an NGO, whether it be a governmental organization, whether it be a university or a startup or even an established company. I think all of us are relatively, maybe except for Raj, part of a small company. And those smaller companies generally have that flexibility to work with all those different organizations. And each project is different. It's going to pull in a different patchwork of grants, perhaps, or university involvement. Everyone is different. So its flexibility is really what helps.
Christoph, same question. What do you think is the key to making this work?
Yeah, first of all, I think having a common vision, a common value understanding, same values for each partner, and of course building trust. I mean, you mentioned it. There are so many different interests, and there are so many different partners involved, and there's not a central person steering that. So you have a lot of people on the table, and sometimes there might be some downsides for one partner, but after all, I think we all can profit from such ecosystem, and this I don't mean only altruistically, but also economically. So I think we are in a field which is very interesting and shows a lot of growth in the future. I think we are just at the very beginning of a dramatically changing industry, and the way how we use mobility and the products we drive in are changing, and that's very interesting and attractive to be in.
Christoph, you raise a good point. Got to make money, got to raise money. Is that part of the secret sauce? Does government need to be involved? Is the investment community there for it? Because while we've been talking of all the technical capabilities that your companies have, at the end of the day, if nobody has the money to pull this off, it's never going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in my opinion, of course, money is the key to make it work. Nevertheless, we see in the last 2 or 3 years a lot of money going into that direction. If you see what is happening on the stock market, but also how, for example, the US government is supporting now the infrastructure change, but also the Canadian government is really pushing. We see that in Europe as well. So there's a lot of money now going into that future technologies, green technologies, and that of course helps to make that change, which is necessary, in my opinion, to become more sustainable with mobility.
Mm-hmm. Pat, I'd like to get your input on that too.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, just going back to what Christoph said, 100%. All of that is common in the industry. So it's very important for us to work with all those different organizations.
Yeah, and how did the whole incubation of things in Windsor come about?
I mean, for us, it was a logical choice for me. I was a Windsor transplant, I guess. I graduated in Ottawa. I moved down to Windsor, worked for FCA. I worked for Roush, did a lot of work on developing EVs. And about the start of COVID, decided to start my own firm here in Windsor. So once I started to interact with some of the different agencies around the Windsor area and started to learn more about this Automobility hub, which was growing at that time, we decided that this was the spot for us.
Mm-hmm. And what kinds of things are you doing within the Automobility hub?
There's lots going on. Participation for us is in Project Aero is a big one. I don't want to speak too much about that, but you've probably heard about it. We're a big participant in that program. So
give us a thumbnail so the audience knows basically what you're talking about with Project Aero.
Yeah, so it's a development of a Canadian content electric vehicle being headed up by the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association of Canada. So we are participating in the digital and electronic integration for the prototype car. So that's a big thing that's going on here. Other projects include things with the college. We have a project that we're doing, not for profit, just with the college to support bringing some of their students up to speed on EV tech, as well as our own, internal projects, both on micro-mobility and in performance as well.
Raj, is Multimatic involved in the mobility movement here? Is that the Mobility Center and Project Aero?
We're not involved in Project Aero. It's we were approached and it looked very interesting to us. But to be honest, we're just frankly so loaded with work and work on a similar vein of electric vehicle projects, whether it's with GM or Ford or Tesla, and so. The war for talent in these areas is just as much an issue as getting funding, and so deploying that talent to the right projects is one of the key decisions we have to make as a business, as well as attracting new talent, which is another advantage of some aspects of working in the Canadian area. That probably the talent shortage still acute, maybe not as acute as it is in other areas of the world.
Mm-hmm. And Christoph, what's PEM doing in terms of this Mobility Center and Project Aero?
So for us, we are one of the starting members, I think, of the Canadian Automobility Hub. It all happened, I think, 3 years ago. I was the first time in Windsor, actually my first time in Canada ever. So I was introduced to Stephen McKenzie, the CEO of Invest Windsor Essex, and I told him about what we are doing in Germany and ecosystem there, but also in Sacramento and California, and he really liked the idea, and they were on the same time working on this ecosystem. So we developed a feasibility study to understand, okay, what are really the strengths in that region, how we can bring the different partners together, how we can integrate the University of Windsor, but also the St. Clair College and all the other partners involved. And that in the end led to the Canadian Automobility Hub. And also it led for us to founding an own company in Windsor called the Automobility Enterprise, where we bring different partners together, the Windsor Mold Group, Integris for the software, LBBZ for the metalwork, and us for the engineering. And we want to offer a white label microfactory for bringing that vehicles to the road, this innovation to the road. We just launched that in November, so we're very happy to be also now part of the Windsor community.
Mm-hmm. We're getting down to the last couple of minutes here, but Raj, if there's any startup, anybody with an idea that really wants to get into the automotive industry, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think one, really learn the industry. It's a very complex product. It's very heavily regulated. It's extremely high volume. It's big investments. It's safety critical. And so it's a really unique industry. And the other is ensure that you've got something that's fixing a problem. There's a lot of solutions out there looking for problems to solve. And that's one of the issues we see in a few of the startups. I think the startups that we see that really understand the problem and then are bringing a solution are the ones that we're really interested in talking to.
Mm-hmm. Pat, your advice to anyone wanting to get into it?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have that experience in the automotive sector, find someone who does. Find a partner who does, find a friend who does, and bring that person into your company. Companies like myself and PEM Motion and Multimatic, obviously we have the people who have that experience and we can help those companies. But if you're really new to it, even before you take that first step, I would encourage you to work with somebody who is, an established engineer with a career in the industry.
Christoph, you have the last word on this.
Oh, thank you very much. We published a book actually with what I want to advise. It's called Think Big, Start Small. Yeah. So I think that you have to have this kind of vision, but it's little baby steps you need to take to get there. And I want to advocate for what Pat said and find the right partners and work with them.
Well, it's very exciting for me to learn what you're all doing, and that in Windsor, Canada, there's so much activity going on with all this new technology, bringing in startups. We're going to have to do a whole show just on Project Aero at some point here, too. It's so fascinating. But I want to thank you all. Raj Nair with Multimatic, Pat Troy with Ettractive, and Christoph Lienemann with PEM Motion. Very good to have you on here today. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much.
And of course, have to thank everybody who has tuned in.
Autoline This Week partnered with the Consulate General of Canada in Detroit to produce this episode.